Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the NIEM Open Webinar, Unveiling the Future of NIEM. For those of you that I've not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Maria Cardielos. I am the Executive Director of the IJIS Institute, and we are very happy to host the NIEM PMO, the NIEM program, and allow them the opportunity to speak to our collaboration community and speak to the accomplishments and the great horizon that is on the program's future. For those of you that don't know IJIS, without spending too much time on that, we are a 25-year nonprofit organization that was originally seeded by the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. And we were brought on with the objective of bettering the relationship between the public and private sectors in order to meet the mission needs of the justice practitioners. NIEM, or what were the earlier generations of XML and GJXDM, et cetera, actually were a focal point in our infancy, in our collective support of the justice community, and in much that we've accomplished in so many different programs. Whether programs know it or not, whether practitioners know it or not, technologists often know whether NIEM is under the covers in its earlier renditions or in its current state. To that end, what was true in the past is very true right now, that NIEM is a program that seeks to enable data sharing between practitioners, not only between agencies, not only between systems, but more importantly, between domains. That was the distinction between the earlier generations and those of late. Our program today is one that we want to bring to you what is Catherine Escobar, who is the Executive Director of the NIEM program and the PMO. And ultimately, she will be emceeing the event, providing you great agenda, great content that brings together not only the program leadership, the operational representatives, the practitioners and their examples of current deployments or usages of NIEM in the field so that you can understand what some of the realities are, but then the future horizon. What is it that's in plan? What is it that has recently been approved? What is it that ultimately we will want your input into? As many of you that are familiar with IJIS may know, is that because our collaboration community represents both public sector, private sector, academia, statisticians, the standards groups, et cetera, our intention as often as we can is to open up the dialogue, provide you updates, but more get your input into the process, because we do have many different individuals from all those constituents at our working tables, but it's nothing like opening up the dialogue for 50, 60, or over 100 individuals that then get a little opportunity to provide us some feedback. So to that end, know that towards the end of the program, we're going to not only respond to the questions that may have arisen during the event, but then we will ask some pointed questions of you as practitioners, as you as service providers, of you as technicians, to understand if there's other areas that you would like us to address. So I thank you for your time. I'm very grateful that you joined us today. Know that we are taping the session. If anybody has a real objection, please let us know, because the intention with the tape is for those that have registered or may have a future interest. They then have the opportunity to review the tapes, understand the content, understand the individuals that they can reach back to as resources as they move towards opening up the opportunities of data sharing within their own environments. So Catherine, I'd love to pass this over to you. I welcome you. You know how IJIS is, our long history with NIEM is one that we are near and dear to wanting to make this program succeed. So anything you need, I am here in shouting distance, but I am going to take myself off the camera so that there's sort of less views and more ability for others to interact and direct the audience.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Maria, for the great introduction. I'm going to pull up my slides and hopefully you'll be able to see them. Let's see. Looks like we've got a success.
Yes.
All right. And welcome, everybody. As Maria indicated, I am the Managing Executive Director for NIEMOpen. Very honored to be here and excited to see such a great turnout and interest in NIEMOpen and the way forward. So without any further ado, because we do have a jam-packed agenda, I'm going to present quickly and move to our first speaker. So as you can see, we're going to be covering down on what are the changes that are coming this year with the new 6.0 architecture. We're going to have some discussion about how NIEM in the field is being worked, more specifically with a focus on how NIEM can contribute to the new hot topic of everybody's agenda in AI, and some real practical experience on the ground. So with that, just a couple of additional slides to orient you on the history of NIEM, which started back in 2001. So you can see that NIEM has really grown over the years and matured and has a great opportunity here as we move into the AI future and 21st century. NIEM has been following all along and trying to continue to keep pace with the needs of the community. We're at 17 domains currently and 3 onboarding domains. We have a couple of other organizations interested in also standing up domains. What does this mean? This means, again, some growth and some opportunity for cross collaboration in your community spaces. So I would highly encourage you that if you're not already a part of a domain, or if you would like to bring on a domain of a specific interest, this is an opportunity, as well as all through the year, of course, but this is an opportunity, since you're focused on it today, to do some outreach to the NIEM Management Office, and we will help you get started. Some of our current moves, as Maria alluded, one of the latest and greatest things that NIEM has done is moved out of the kind of focused government space and into the open source arena, moving into OASIS. And we'll hear more about that. But one of the key things as a result of that is the necessity for sponsorship, both with hard dollars and in-kind resources. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and the maintenance of NIEM and what it requires. But this puts the ability for you to become a real strategic partner, really make some changes, continue to support the program to meet your needs. So we are very excited about how this will play in the open source arena. What do open projects do? So this is some just some of the key advantages, if you will, of an open source project and what it can provide. Beyond the government-led NIEM, previously known as National Information Exchange Model, now this really brings a new sort of view to the industry. And OASIS is helping us on that journey. As you can see, bringing OASIS on as a partner, being a part of this open source community really opens up the opportunities. So why OASIS? It was one of the most flexible opportunities when we explored going into a official standard idea. We did an evaluation across the various standards development organizations, and OASIS really proved out to be one of the partners that was going to be the most flexible and allow us to continue to grow and mature at the pace necessary to keep up with technology. As we're moving into the 21st century, this is part of that. You will see and you will hear from Dr. Scott Renner about the changes in the overall architecture, how we're making NIEM more flexible and agile in the way of being able to translate in a multitude of different formats, be it JSON, XML, being a partner with ontology development and knowledge graphs. So we're very excited about this way forward. And so with that, What are the things that we're looking forward to? This year alone, we are looking to become an official standard. We're releasing this new architecture and the models and the new tooling to go along with that. We have new training updates that will be launched. We're currently in the process of doing some beta testing on that training, and we're excited to share that with you. And so, without any further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Dr. Scott Renner, who is a co-chair on our Technical Architecture Committee, and who has been a key enabler of this technology all along. So, Dr. Scott, I turn it over to you.
All right, excellent. NIEM is about helping programmers write software that correctly exchanges data at runtime. NIEM gives you a couple things for that. It's a standard for specifying the exchanges so that developers have programmer level documentation about what the data they need to provide and what they should expect. And NIEM also gives you a community agreed reusable data model that's a starting point for those specifications. So as a result, you can do better than trying to build a separate exchange between every pair of participants, which won't work because you have too many pairs. And you also can do better than trying to build the one big data model of everything for everybody, because that never works at any kind of scale. One thing I should mention is that while we talk about NIEM as exchanging messages, it works just fine for other things as well. You can use NIEM to define the data that's going to be passed through an API. You can use NIEM to define data that you expose as a resource on the web, because NIEM doesn't really care about how the data gets from where it is to where it needs to go. It's all about what that data means and do people understand it. NIEM 6 is a lot different from previous versions. We've done a lot of rewriting, and these are the things that I'll be talking about. We're supporting JSON. We have a new way to represent data models that's not based on XML. We're offering a way to make your data available to artificial intelligence applications. And we've learned that specifications alone don't get the job done, so we will talk about some of the free and open source developer tools that we are providing. So NIEM was created in the heyday of XML data exchanges. And for some time, XML was the only thing that NIEM did, but there's still plenty of people who work with XML. But what we're finding now is that JSON is more popular and more convenient to work with, and so we've started to add support for JSON as well as XML. One of the things we provide is an exact mapping between XML messages and JSON messages, so developers can work with either or both as they like. And in fact, XML and JSON are not the only possibilities. We're going to be able to support many equivalent formats. We should be able to translate between JSON, XML, YAML, Google Protobuf, Apache Avro, maybe others. We don't need to write a separate translator for each message format because the information that we capture in our message model has everything that a generic translator needs to convert data from one format to another. So we've always captured those message models in XML schema, and that works out pretty well when people are doing XML-based data exchange. But if you want to work with JSON, it's not so good. So we sat down and first came up with an abstract model of all of the information that a message model needs to contain, and then we used that to build a NIEM-based data exchange. The result is what we call the common model format. It is a NIEM message, just like any other NIEM message, but this message tells you what goes in the model for NIEM messages. Every model has an equivalent representation in XML schema and CMF, but as a tool developer, I can tell you that it's a lot easier to work with CMF than trying to get that information out of an XML schema pile. And so this is opening the door to capabilities that things we were not able to do with our models in the past. We can take a message model represented as a CMF file, and we can turn it into a number of artifacts that will be convenient for developers. We can turn it into a JSON schema file that you can use to validate JSON messages, see if they conform to the specification. We'll be able to turn it into XML schema that, because we're not using this XML schema to represent the model, it can be a lot simpler and easier for developers to work with. We can turn it into interface description languages for other things like Protobuf and OpenAPI. We should be able to generate UML diagrams to show things to people. Wait a minute. Another thing that we're able to do is generate RDF versions of our message models and of the messages as well, so that you can take a model and express it as RDF, and you can take a NIEM-based message and express that as RDF as well. Putting those two things together, a model that's in RDF and a message that's RDF, and the connections between them turns NIEM data and NIEM models into something called a knowledge graph. Knowledge graphs have applications in artificial intelligence and data fabrics and several other things. And we look at NIEM as like a technology on-ramp for those applications. Most of the developers working with XML and JSON data don't know anything about knowledge graphs, and usually they don't really want to know anything about them, and they don't have to. If they use NIEM, then the data they exchange can be used by the people who do know and do care about these things and apply them for AI things. We're in the process of rewriting our technical specifications, and that includes our key specification, the naming and design rules. If you're interested, you can get on our GitHub site and watch the sausage being made. In addition to the technical specification, NIEMOpen is providing some free and open source software to help message designers and message developers with their work. I'm going to give a quick demo of two of these. One of them, called CMF Tool, is a command line tool that helps developers work with CMF files and XML schema together. And API 2.0 is a web backend that will support all kinds of tool developers who want to work with those models. I'll be showing you the NIEM toolbox, which is a web front end for those things. So we can make this work. I should now stop sharing that and start sharing this wonderful command line. CMF tool is a command line tool, and so the demo is not all that exciting. We're now looking at a message exchange, which I call Crash Driver. We built this so that we can exercise pretty much every feature in the NIEM technical architecture and make sure it works for XML, JSON, and RDF. So this is what a crash driver message looks like. And it tells you about some kind of vehicle crash. When did it happen? Where did it happen? What cars were involved? Who was driving them? This guy was driver's name, Peter Whimsy, et cetera, et cetera. The model for that message exists in a number of XML schema files. Here's one that's the top level XML schema file for the crash driver message. And it tells you this is what you're going to find in the message, something about the crash, were there any criminal charges, things like that. Now what the tool will do for you is you can take that, well, here's CMF tool. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It does a lot of things. What we're going to use it first is to convert that XML schema file into a CMF file. I will give it the schema, tell it to give me a CMF file. Poof, tells me how I found a lot of namespaces, and here is the CMF file that I just created. There's the model. tells us about the namespaces in the model, and then starts to talk about some of the properties and classes that are in that model. You can also take that model and turn it back into an XML schema file. And look, it's the exact same schema file. And if I turn that back into CMF, I get the same CMF back. Hooray! Well, what else can you do with that CMF file now that you have it? One cool thing is you can use the information in the model to convert an XML message into a JSON message. What I'm showing you now is old code that I'm going to have to rewrite, but take that XML message and turn it into a JSON message. This is the same information, just in a different format. Another thing you can do here is, if you would rather have RDF, you can do that as well. Same information, but now it's expressed as an RDF file. The last thing to show you is taking that file and turning it into JSON schema for validating the JSON message. Let's see if this works. Oh, yeah, right. Ta-da! This is JSON schema. You apply this schema to that JSON message I generated, and it will tell you whether it's valid or not. So not terribly exciting, but if you are a NIEM message designer or developer, this is going to be very helpful. So you can try this demo at home. CMF tool is in one of our repos. And if you go to the repo and look in the releases, you can download a zip file with the executables, and you can do the same thing. And that example that I showed you, Crash Driver, is also in a repo. So you can do this at home. But what I want to show you now is the NIEM toolbox. This is the front end to the API that I was talking about. It's largely is work in progress, but I can show you some things that happen. And here we will look at how to validate XML schema file, testing it against the elaborate naming and design rules we have for those. So I click on that, say that I want to validate conformance to the naming and design rules, choose a file. We will look at this file called privacy metadata because I happen to know it has errors in it. And click validate, and what we'll get is a report of the rules that it does not satisfy. Largely, looking at these where everything is supposed to have a documentation element, and I didn't bother to put those in this conveniently, so you have errors to show you. That is it for me, I think. I talked about what's new. I've shown you some of the tools we are building, and I believe I now turn it back over to our MC, and we can listen to Brad tell us about exciting things for the future.
Well, before we do that, there's a couple more questions online.
Okay.
So James was able to type in his question. Seems that AI could revolutionize NIEM development processes and indeed the whole process of data modeling anywhere. AI could auto-generate between these various formats. Would be cool if AI could create an Irwin model for all of NIEM. Do you have a thought or comment about that?
So we have seen experiments trying to use large language models to create NIEM message specifications, NIEM models, and they look plausible, but they've always been incorrect. So the best I think you can hope for in the near future is something that does the early part of your work, but for now you are going to need a knowledgeable person to examine the results and make sure it is correct, which is pretty much always the case with large language models. Over.
All
I
right.
will add some of those opportunities are part of this next piece of the presentation as well. So a pressing question though, for sure.
So the next question is from a anonymous attendee. The question is this running on R IDE? Thank you. What is,
I do not understand that question. The software that you saw is it's just a Java application program. There's no IDE required. I use an IDE to write the code, but you don't need anything other than a Java runtime environment to run it. The next question, so I'm looking to chat too now, Catherine, is what about OWL? The RDF version of a NIEM model, when you translate it not to CMF but to RDF, it uses OWL vocabulary for that. We use OWL subclass of and other things from that vocabulary. So yeah, we are using OWL RDFS. We will be using shackle and something called dash as well for cardinality constraints. Over.
and then James Harris acknowledged, yes, there must always be human intervention. Are there any other questions before we're a little ahead in the agenda, which is really great. We have some time for Q&A as we go along. But I'm not seeing any other questions. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Brad Bollinger, who can talk about some of the work in the AI knowledge graph and ontology space. Mr. Bollinger is also one of the NTAC co-chairs and supports NIEMOpen as well as his day job as working with Ernst Young. So with no further ado, I turn it over to you, Brad.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us and for your patience just now. My name is Brad Bollinger. As you heard, I'm a manager in the AI and data practice at Ernst Young, helping folks modernize their information exchanges, particularly in the criminal justice space, and as well as data and analytics strategy and more types of AI use cases and solutions like that. I'm going to be talking about future architectures for the NIEMOpen initiative, building on the exciting new features in NIEMOpen 6.0, the role of ontologies and how to leverage them for greater semantic understanding, and how NIEM facilitates AI adoption and reliability as well. Kicking forward, I've got a kind of big bluff here that you saw just a second ago. Coming from NIEM 6 and looking beyond how we build on some of those interesting tools that you just saw Scott present, and especially how to unlock future success for your organization's message exchanges. I'm going to talk about how ontologies empower NIEM and ultimately how NIEM enables AI as well, and give a little bit of a case study that I think teases some of the future content that's coming a little bit later in this presentation. As you heard in the introduction, though, I'm going to try to help connect the dots between NIEM's current architecture and tool sets to facilitate greater flexibility and integrity of those systems moving forward, some of the goals for future iterations of NIEM and new tools, as well as how to unlock critical enablers for your success in your message exchange environments. In particular, how data provenance, data quality, and data governance activities are performed, but also how that information is communicated to other stakeholders of your organization. Ultimately, what we have right now is new levels of flexibility for developers, new levels of utility for analysts, and new levels of confidence for administrators that help make the entire information environment not just more rich, but more reliable and easier to maintain and modernize. One of the important notes that Scott discussed in his section was how ontologies are fundamental to empowering NIEM and facilitating semantic consistency, in particular across distributed systems. Indeed, NIEM was originally designed for that purpose. And in particular, ontologies help establish instances of knowledge graphs, and how that works is really important to ensure that that information can be modeled in flexible ways, and that data can be communicated and shared in formats that are convenient for people, again, in that model agnostic sort of way. The way these new tools help generate new insights and collaborate with new types of stakeholders by having this structured approach to knowledge really makes it easier for others to understand, and brings greater rigor and insight, in particular to give insight from domain experts and ontologists that help unlock new information previously hidden in unstructured data in particular. Ontologies and knowledge graphs are particularly important for helping make that unstructured or complex content machine ready, in the same way that machine-to-machine communication is a fundamental aspect and goal of the NIEM initiative in the first place. This also makes it easier to iteratively accommodate new sources or open source intelligence directly in your environment as part of the same query scope. That's something I'm going to follow up on a little bit later. And these kind of components in particular are something I'm going to give a bit of a case study on a little bit later. Finally, the way NIEM enables AI is an important stepping stone to unlocking not just value and not just data quality, but to get more value from the AI use cases that you do pilot. How structured representations of what we believe is true in a certain environment provide meaningful guardrails to have better validated responses from those non-deterministic systems, as came up in the chat just a minute ago, and ultimately striving towards a more trustworthy set of solutions, not just AI, but machine learning in general. Moving ahead, please, Phil. I want to elaborate on the future architecture just a little bit, and how NIEM 6.0 in particular, but also our goals for NIEM 7 and beyond, bring new utility for NIEMopen communities of interest more broadly. It's really important to enable future architectures as you see fit in your information ecosystems. And I want to elaborate on this part in particular about bringing new utility. As part of the regular course of business, integrating new model domains bespoke to the needs of our constituents is an ongoing aspect of all forthcoming releases. You'll see some iterative releases coming over the next couple of years, to be sure. And you heard just a minute ago about how these new tools in place to empower developers to implement or modernize legacy information sharing environments with this robust new set of tools. But this third piece here, the cloud native architecture and development tools, are a key use case of NIEM 6.0, how we help you all achieve cloud native architectures with that same local flexibility. So when you need to be in a secure on-premise environment, you have access to the same tools, the same technology, and runtime environments, in regardless of the stack, with cloud native components, as well as kind of commodified, publicly available skill sets as well. So it's not just convenient for developers, but a flexible and powerful set of features available to administrators to make more informed architectural decisions as well. Finally, the integration with semantic tools for ontology and knowledge graph modeling, as was discussed a minute ago, is really important to have a robust future set of data regardless of source system, and unify them into that same set of information. This is also ultimately about unlocking critical enablers for success in your message exchange environments, in particular, assertions and best practices for data provenance, quality, and governance. How you communicate that information to others is also critical to the health of information-rich environments, and a key initiative for us moving forward. Numerous organizations across the country and internationally rely on NIEM to ensure that data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Indeed, that is its core purpose, so that all of these stakeholders have access to the same rich information. Further, opportunities still exist to build on the utility of this new CMF and API tools, not just for command line level implementation, but to fast track model design and exchange development as well, to accommodate new data elements. Finally, and critically, structured, semantically meaningful frameworks with NIEM makes it easier to access insights that are buried in documents or video or audio or other unstructured data files in a way that can be operationalized and integrated into your information environment as part of, again, the same query scope. This is a really powerful combination of features that are now more convenient than ever, and again, flexible regardless of your preferred system. Moving forward, I want to elaborate in particular about how NIEM facilitates the semantic layer. Ensuring semantic consistency across distributed systems is never easy, but with knowledge graphs representing instances of ontologies, you get robust insights with structured, semantically rich relationships in a way that is much easier to take advantage of programmatically. I've already discussed how these flexible tools and structured knowledge make it easier to get access to data that's in new types of sources and bring structured insights, to unstructured data. We just saw on the next slide, I'll kind of accelerate the plot here a little bit. We saw just a minute ago, Phil, if you could advance the slide for me, please. We saw this as the purpose of NIEM just a minute ago, right? Stakeholders aligning to define the information that's required in a slightly more abstract way than the particulars of a given message is really critical to enabling the semantic layer and is a key step in the message exchange design process. Message designers, analysts, subject matter experts you see there align on the desired data structures between sources and targets so that the implementation layer is cleaner and it's easier to rationalize distributed sets of interfaces and align them to more common exchange formats without needing one single message to rule them all. Moving forward again, please. I'm going to skip through a handful of slides here pretty quickly. I want to reiterate this particular message as well about how model plus message makes this structured representation, taking advantage of that modeled ontology layer, that semantic layer of what we say these elements mean, and connect them to the instances of a given data element, a set of data elements, I should say. But in particular, why the way that the model is designed helps establish that ontology layer, right? That's really fundamental. What the components mean and what they mean in a certain context so that a given data instance can be much more direct and used more directly is really critical. And I want to elaborate on how NIEM helps to do this. We skip ahead. This is not a trivial task. How NIEM helps organizations model an enterprise knowledge graph. You need to take care of a couple of very important details that can vary widely across distributed systems in particular. Fundamental to this is the entities in their data and their relationships between them. But to make something semantically meaningful requires an understanding of a larger picture. How do data and processes interact? What protocols interact with these data? What system-driven processes interact with these data or trigger messages to be sent? And how do we identify gaps between what we have and what we need to have a more robust set of information and get to the target state of our desired information environment? As an example, as part of the state submission to a national exchange, the state of Illinois' implementation of NIBRS includes a process flow diagram, which describes the way an incident report is validated and then approved and resubmitted. So a patrol officer submits a report and then reviews any coding corrections after several local reviews. The exchange therefore needs a way not only to keep track of an individual submission, but to ensure that resubmissions or updated submissions are treated in a similar way and handled appropriately as the information comes. At some levels of organization, particularly in tightly coupled local exchanges, messages are directly related to their final submission to the receiving system, whereas higher levels of organization may require more iteration and correlated data, which are described very differently in different systems, but semantically mean very similar things. Just as a thought experiment, right? What is the difference between a subject and a party? Certainly they are both people, and certainly they are different. How and why that information is available at different times to describe these people and their relationships to other data, and how these differences manifest in the particular messages that are exchanged is really fundamental to understanding the full landscape of why messages are shared and how to design more robust, better performant exchanges. On the next slide, Phil, I want to talk about when I help clients navigate these problems, it's really important to zoom all the way out and understand the entire ecosystem. who is sending what information is really important, but it's also important to know how the technical architecture, physical, virtual machines trigger which system processes, so that you have a complete picture of the workflow across these distributed systems, not just messages which contain information for a certain stakeholder. This is a redacted diagram, unfortunately, which describes several interfaces between different types of systems. We folded in some of the business processes so that you could see which steps of a process were manual and which were automated, so that you could understand bottlenecks in your integration services and facilitate modernization and overall planning in a broader context of your overall technology ecosystem. Graphs help you understand what you have, not just from a data perspective, but you can model a lot of things, as many ontologists will be quick to point out. On the next slide, I want to elaborate on the case study of how this works, because this is not a trivial problem, right? This is fundamentally important because data can vary so significantly, even when describing the same thing in people working with the same information, the same people, the same cases, the same warrants, just within a given integrated justice system. This is a hypothetical example of the data organization for a county's integrated justice system that exchanges messages between a sheriff's office system, superior court's case system of record, and several other types of systems, including attorneys and other stakeholders. Not only does every one of these records have a person attached to it, many times they're describing the same charges or responding with updates to make those charges or those filings from different viewpoints, recommending updates to probation or sentence terms, or simply communicating court calendars to different stakeholders, again, across systems, so that you have to send a message to some receiving system that then has to interpret what you mean. And the key role of ontologies and knowledge graphs in particular to make that clearer and connected and give you one view of what you have across these different systems is really something that NIEM makes much, much easier to implement practically. On the next slide. In this next slide, I'm going to try to clarify that picture a little bit. This is a simplified representation of some of that same data organization that we just looked at, informed by that rich information architecture context. The first thing I will point out is a distinction just made a minute ago, the way that entity layer, the J subject, right, meaning who the people are, as distinct from the operational aspects of this particular enterprise. We've seen this as a critical success factor for connecting disparate data, but as well as bringing a person-centric view to criminal justice in particular, which offers distinct advantages to the traditional focuses on case management activities and focusing on my own data. You can then fold in a greater context. By describing data at an aggregate level, NIEM types and their properties, we can more easily connect the dots across a community of interest. On the left in this yellow background, you see data from a hypothetical law enforcement system. Maybe this is a sheriff's booking record. This message is described by these yellow circles. Or it's an arrest report related to some kind of person or case. Maybe it closes a warrant in the court systems in the blue. Or triggers a new hearing date as part of some typical business process. In some states, you're booked on charges that could incur jail time. You have to go before a judge within 48 hours. It can be problematic to rely on manual paper-driven processes to inform that, and it's really important that that happens programmatically. Finally, on the right, as an example in the purple, are attorney systems, which again, tie to the subject, various case filing and charges, but also ingest and interpret the case events that happen in court, again, in a kind of local context. So in this way, you can see not only a structured representation of an individual system's data, not only a comparison of similar data elements across systems, you can also see how a given item connects to some other data element as part of a workflow, again, across distributed systems to ensure, in this case, the administration of justice occurs effectively. This is something we help our clients with at EY to help modernize information exchange environments in a future forward way. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about how AI can leverage some of these pieces moving forward. The ways in which NIEM enables AI is a complex topic with a lot of different areas of opportunity. As I've just illustrated, the common vocabulary not only future-proofs your systems and their upgrades, it also brings more sources into scope and more structure to the information for machine use. It's important to call out that in these rapidly changing times, that AI use cases still are much more than language models. In particular, graph algorithms are highly relevant, actionable intelligence for mission partners as a result of the connectivity of your data. Not just friend-of-a-friend networks and non-obvious relationships, but how central is something to a given network of illicit activity, for example. Further, AI can facilitate approaches to data management, data preparation, data source mapping to new targets, or interpret and enforce structure applied to unstructured data, which in many of these domains is at a scale that can be very difficult for humans to interact with in a systematic way. Now, it's very important to note that there are deterministic systems that are more reproducible, and there are trade-offs with these non-deterministic systems, probabilistic systems that are trying to guess what the right answer is. So it is also really important to have this human-defined semantic structure, as well as humans in the loop to make sure that these things are consistent with what the users expect to see. Now, in particular, NIEM facilitates these pieces by providing that structured target format aligned with a semantically meaningful defined model, right? This unlocks new potential for that unstructured data, but also to integrate that information into your overall landscape. I mentioned earlier the concept of integrating all these sources into the same query scope. Imagine what you could do if you could ask natural language questions of the data in your ecosystem and have the confidence in a language model's reliability and consistency, thanks to NIEM conforming taxonomies. In particular, we've been focusing on graph data structures and graph algorithms because of the potential promise, I should say, shown of graph retrieval augmented generation, in particular, providing that repeatable structure, a definition of the ground source of truth. But this is not a trivial problem. Phil, if you'll advance the slide, just one more. This is not a trivial problem and requires many critical steps being applied in conjunction and empowering a robust set of stakeholders with robust domain knowledge. With an ontological foundation, finding entities, their relationships, and robust definitions of entities, instances of those entities, collections of those instances, membership of groups, or exclusion from certain groups are fundamentally important to bringing semantic structure to these types of tools. But with that better informed structure, much more is available to expand the scope of data that you can leverage for insights. Not just structured messages, but structured knowledge to unleash the insights buried in that unstructured data, treating documents, video or audio files, or other data structures as a first-class data source, just like you treat your own first-party data. Finally, this context helps bring guardrails to make better informed decisions and clearer ability to achieve or ROI, on your AI investments. Better ability to plan, better ability to democratize who has access to what, or tools to take advantage of that data moving forward in line with your particular function. Just one more slide to conclude. Ultimately, we also want to understand what the community values in the next generation of NIEM, looking from 6.0 to 7.0 and beyond. How can NIEM improve the trustworthiness of your AI investments? Clearer labels of AI controls, estimates of confidence, and explainability of those outputs are critical to the way that those models are built, but in particular, systems are built using those types of models. And how can NIEM help empower you to take better advantage of AI in a repeatable, reliable way? Further, NIEM is intended to facilitate information exchange between different systems. How can implementation be made simpler? We've seen a lot of different tools that should make this more convenient for developers across different types of file and data structures. We heard, this is totally anecdotally, one state said they saved 50% of the cost and 50% of the time building their court data exchange using NIEM. Surely that's something others can take advantage of, and we want to learn some of the best practices and hear how you approach some of the challenges that you find in your information exchanges. And then finally, what value do your stakeholders expect you to deliver? We make it easier to align distributed systems to that common vocabulary. And then what you do with it to bring insights to your stakeholders or your constituencies is really how to make the most of NIEM moving forward. These are the types of things we want to hear from you. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Brad, thank you very much. We do have a few questions that were posted in the Q&A and a few comments. But the first one is from Mr. Doug Oates, primarily to achieve interoperability and integration for agencies to retain full ownership of incident data and metadata. This feels very necessary to mitigate concerns regarding Walgreens, and that's in quotes, or Walgreens.
Walled gardens, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
from significant platform solution providers. Do you have a comment on that or anything that you'd like to address?
Well, I think first like to commend the IJIS Institute and some of those working groups for that RMS functional specification, which was released recently. I'm told that it had a very warm reception at the IACP Tech Conference not too long ago. And the way that those functional specifications inform not just better structure, but how data is managed and governed, who has access to it and when and why, and who we share it with, with a kind of responsible and what's the word that I mean? Verified use in general is really an important aspect of understanding what data you keep within your own system and what data is important to share with your mission partners. Because as you note in the second part of as Doug notes in the second part of the question, these walled gardens and individual kind of source systems that can be their own private enclaves or vendors that are reluctant to change the way that they publish data back and forth. You can use some of these tools and a NIEM sort of framework to abstract away that problem so that you can just build an interface on it yourself that does what you need it to do. I think that's a couple answers to that question.
Aaron Isaacson has also posted a comment, not so much a question, maybe there's a question in here. I see data preparation noted. Has there been any work on using AI to help identify required transformation on the source data set to match the NIEM model? This would make the process of moving an existing system over to NIEM much simpler and require less manual work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple answers to that question. I wonder if Scott has a perspective as well. But from my perspective, I think we've discussed a little bit how there is that human, and I use the word semantic a lot, but what people say the data means is still pretty important to the successful execution of these systems. I think there is an important way that new types of tools, including how AI can be used to align sources to better structured target data formats, is certainly important. Mapping like elements could be done much faster, for example. And I mentioned a couple of these, but I think ultimately the point is that they are, I think for now, best fit as point solutions, as a suite of smaller AI use cases. Functions maybe is a better way to think of them. But that's certainly an opportunity, not just to do data preparation, but also to build mapping and modernize legacy exchanges to upgraded versions of NIEM, for example. And I think there is, in a similar way, there's a similar set of opportunity for making those mappers something you can build much faster as well.
All right, thank you. The next question, and I think maybe all three or maybe even more of the panelists would have additional answers. So I will address it first and then hand it over if you have additional comments. So how does NIEM differentiate from schema.org, BFO, Wikidata, Dolce, et cetera, et cetera? What I would tell you is that each one of these has a slightly different approach to solving the problem, but NIEM would be in complement to these different technologies, if you will. I don't know of a better word to describe it, versus a competitor. I don't know if you would have anything to elaborate, Brad or Scott or Jim or any of our other panelists. I open it to you.
Yeah, would only like to add that I think that's fundamental to the message of the last portion of my section here in particular. The way that NIEM complements and takes advantage of ontologies or structures like that as you define them to build message exchange specifications that are aligned to how those ontologies are structured and defined by domain experts, I think is fundamentally important. But I don't think I have too much to add to that answer.
Dr. Scott?
Thinking too hard. BFO is something that we will be connecting to, but it exists at a higher level of abstraction than anything in NIEM, which is about concrete solutions for developers and their data exchanges. We're a lot closer to something called the Common Core ontology, which is an extension of BFO, and that's something that we might, in the future, start relating the NIEM model to. The other thing, NIEM is distinguished by, I mean, there are a number of efforts to produce community agreed data models and exchange specifications. NIEM is the only one I know of that intends a universal scope. The others that I see are all focused on some particular subject area domain. If you have a large enterprise and you need to deal with many different domains, then NIEM is going to be right for you. I saw the backward compatible question is
Yeah, you
interesting.
should definitely come on that.
That's the next one online. Yes. So with that, I'll move to Michael Knapp's question. As NIEM moves forward to newer versions, what will be the difficulty to update? And will it be backwards compatible to systems not utilizing the newer version? So what I would tell you is we have, even prior to my onboarding with NIEM, there's always been a position to keep the legacy versions available and open, not to retire them. So if there is older versions of NIEM out there, they have the option to continue to use the version if they're working and there's no reason to change. But there are mechanisms and tooling to migrate to the newer versions if that's your choosing. Again, I would open it to some of our other panelists if they have additional comment.
So the most important thing about NIEM here is that no one ever has to change what they're doing because somebody else makes a change to something they control. So if you have a data exchange that's based on NIEM 2 or 3 or whatever, and it's doing what you want, you can run it to the end of time. But the interesting thing from my point of view is making the CMF tool, the things that I'm working on, usable with an unchanged NIEM 3 or NIEM 4 or NIEM 5 specification. And so far that seems to be working. So you should be able to take your existing data exchange, which is probably entirely XML based, and run it through the tools to generate JSON schema, to translate your messages to and from JSON and XML, to spit out RDF versions of your model using RDFS and OWL vocabularies. I think all of those things are going to work. Over.
All right, excellent. And I think we have an affirmation on this from our anonymous attendee stating that they implemented version 2.0 and it's working just fine for them. So thank you for that, Mr. Anonymous. Okay, with that, let's move to the next speaker. And I'm really honored to have Mr. Jim Cabral, who is one of our OASIS partners. He's on the OASIS board to give us a little insights and updates about what OASIS really means for NIEMOpen and vice versa. So without any further ado, Mr. Jim Cabral.
Thanks, Catherine. And I don't have any slides. I'm just going to speak quickly to what it, as she said, what it means for NIEM to be part of the OASIS family now. So for those who don't know me, I'm a longtime user of and contributor to the NIEM as a consultant that's helped transform justice and public safety systems across the country for a while. But today I'm speaking to you as a member of the OASIS Open Board of Directors. And on behalf of OASIS, I want to say we are thrilled to host NIEMOpen, and that is today one of our largest open projects. For those who are not familiar with OASIS, we are an internationally recognized standards development organization, SDO, Specifically, we are a nonprofit member association. That's a 501c6 that's funded almost exclusively by annual subscriptions by our members. So we have a very diverse membership. We include large and small technology companies, government agencies, universities, research institutions, other nonprofits, and even individuals. And for over 30 years, our members have come together in technical committees to collaboratively develop technical specifications that hopefully one day become official OASIS standards. Several of the most widely implemented OASIS standards, including the Common Alerting Protocol, CAP, standard used by many emergency management agencies internationally, and the Legal XML electronic court filing standard, which is used in many courts across the United States, are all based on the NIEM. So when OASIS launched our open projects program a few years ago to support large branded projects, it opened the door for NIEM to finally join OASIS as NIEMOpen. So why are we so excited that NIEMOpen is now part of OASIS? And I'll share 5 things that really are important to me. First, by opening up sponsorship of NIEMOpen to public sector, private sector, and nonprofit organizations that use and depend on it, we improve the long-term sustainability of the program. Historically, NIEM and the Global Justice XML data model, the GJXDM that preceded it, depended on a single US federal agency to host and fund those efforts. And that was to the tune of millions of dollars per year. While we are all grateful to the DOJ, the DHS, HHS, and the DoD for each taking their turn hosting NIEM, if NIEM is going to be successful long-term, it needs a permanent home. And OASIS is happy to provide that. And given some of the current changes in federal funding and policies, the timing of the transition to OASIS couldn't have been better. I'm also proud to say that the IJIS Institute, as well as IJIS members, Equivant, and an IJIS partner, NIEGIS, have all stepped up to help sustain NIEM as our some of our NIEMOpen sponsors. So secondly, while NIEM has tried various approaches for governance and reaching consensus over its many years, now NIEMOpen can leverage the proven processes and tools for open collaboration and managing intellectual property concerns that OASIS has used successfully for many years. Third, as a NIEM implementer, we depend on the availability of not just the models and naming and design rules, but as Dr. Scott showed earlier, the tools that help us develop and validate conformance of our implementations. NIEMOpen now provides a stable place to host our tools. Fourth, if we want to continue to increase the adoption and the support of NIEMOpen, we can't just continue to rely on word of mouth. We need to actively promote it. And OASIS provides a team of marketing and business development experts that help us get the word out to both potential users as well as potential sponsors. And last, and perhaps most importantly, OASIS provides a path for NIEMOpen to finally become an official open standard. And once NIEMOpen is a true open standard, it will be easier for organizations, especially government agencies, to mandate its use. So we are excited to share that NIEM 6 is already well on its way to becoming an OASIS standard. On behalf of the OASIS board, thank you everyone for joining today and for your interest in NIEMOpen. We continue to be excited for the future of NIEMOpen, and we really hope you'll join us on this journey. Back to you, Catherine.
With that said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker who can provide some real on-the-ground, if you will, implementation and success story of NIEM in how it's really made a difference, you know, and can give you a perspective on that. So without any further ado, I'll introduce Miss Tammy Blackstone and Mr. Jim Pringle, who are working with the Iowa Justice, Integrated Justice and Mission Critical Partners.
Thank you, Catherine. So again, my name is Tammy Blackstone. I work for the Iowa Department of Management, and I'm the coordinator for Iowa Integrated Justice. And as Catherine mentioned, I'll be joined here by Jim Pingle. Mission Critical Partners is our longtime partner and vendor since the conception of our program. So really what I'm going to be showing here today is what Brad talked about, what Dr. Renner talked about, and showing a little bit about what that looks like in practice. So in Iowa, we are so lucky to have a state that is very committed to data sharing. This started back in 2007 with a partnership between our executive branch and our judicial branch. So our governor and our chief justice got together and created what was then called CJIS. Many on this call will know why we recently changed our name from CJIS to Iowa Integrated Justice. CJIS was a little bit confusing. So we are now Iowa Integrated Justice, housed at the Iowa Department of Management. So since we've been around since 2007, we have had 18 years and more, if you consider the planning phase of this, to really develop our data sharing system in Iowa. It has matured and grown significantly, and we have really embedded ourselves as a part of Iowa's critical infrastructure. We have 17 state-level agencies in the state of Iowa, and 10 of those 17 are connected in some way through Iowa Integrated Justice and our data sharing system. That's the state level. On the county level, about 2/3 of our county attorneys, those prosecutors, are connected through our system, every single county attorney. In fact, on the law enforcement level, all the way from our state patrol down to our local police departments, nearly every law enforcement agency in Iowa is connected and benefits through this data sharing. So the fact that IIJ was conceived utilizing the NIEM model, continues to use it, has been consistent, has really allowed us to have all of these agencies either use their legacy systems, they can change their systems as needed, and that does not affect the model that we use and the system that we've created over time. We can adjust very easily to whatever agencies want to use. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim Pingle from Mission Critical Partners, and he's going to show our next slide, which really shows this robust system that we have created. And Jim, I'm going to let you kind of explain what we're seeing here.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, it's been our pleasure to work with Tammy and her predecessors from the beginning of this project. And really between Brad and Tammy, I think they've just about described what NIEM does for the state of Iowa. So all I'm going to do is kind of give you an overview of exactly how we've implemented it and how we describe it to the partners in Iowa, not all of whom are familiar with what the National Information Exchange Model is or have heard small things about it. But kind of the sales pitch of why NIEM and why we do this way is kind of what I'll cover today. So a few more numbers. First of all, 26 total different distinct data exchanges are implemented as part of the IIJ program to date. That started out with an electronic citation from the TRAX ticketing software to the courts back in, I think it was 2008, 2009 when that was first implemented. Today, according to the last count, the average number of messages that flow through these 26 exchanges is about 200,000 per month. And if you zoom in a little bit and look at the captions on any one of those arrows represent those 26 data exchanges. And you start to see that what Iowa has done is really, from beginning to end, automated the criminal justice process and the flow of information through the system, from citations and arrests on the left-hand side all the way through to corrections and court dispositions on the right-hand side. Not surprisingly, it is Iowa state courts that like this graphic the most because, they're the sun in our solar system. Any one of these agencies could probably see themselves as the fulcrum or the initiating or a more important part of this process, but it really is true. Obviously, that a lot of criminal justice processing goes through the courts, all the way through to corrections, as well as feeding kind of those statewide and national repositories and resources from the state's criminal history repository to the state sex offender registry, as well as the national InstaCheck, the NICS system, hot files, message switches. We have a couple of places where a data request actually feeds an NLETS query, querying a DOC status, for example. And over time, starting in criminal justice, as you can see, Iowa's ecosystem has expanded to the partners closest to the justice community, whether it's human services. Voter registration keeps their voter rolls updated with convicted and felons who have petitioned to be reinstated, or voting rights reinstated. So relying on a direct data exchange to manage that aspect of voter rolls. And then things like juvenile and foster care case visits, data exchange with the caseworkers on the juveniles who have an overlap between the delinquency portion of courts and the child or the protective services portion of juvenile justice or juvenile court processing. So again, very extensive, and for things we've already talked about, NIEM really has provided this scalability from a couple of simple criminal justice data exchanges to the rest of the community. And Tammy alluded to the level of uptake of adoption across state and local agencies. Next slide is really, let's kind of drill down into how we've implemented NIEM in any one of these data exchanges. And we didn't alter this slide very much for the sake of the national webinar today. I wanted to kind of go over how we describe the implementation, the use of NIEM in data exchange to our Iowa partners, whether that's state and local practitioners, or whether it's service providers or vendors who are coming into the program. Starts with planning, and we talk about, and really this process relies on not only the NIEM data model, but the information exchange package, documentation, specification, and process, and starting to leverage the model exchange package, starting with a collaborative approach, starting with identifying the business transactions. As you saw on the previous slide, everything is based on criminal justice transactions of information that happen on a day-to-day basis. And really, each one of these exchanges is built around the need to exchange specific pieces of information. And the practitioners and the vendors on both sides of an exchange are at the table helping to plan and build these specs. So that's really been Iowa's answer to the questions earlier about governance and about appropriate use, is that by being this granular about the data exchange that we define, what's an e-citation, what is a court disposition, we're able to kind of lock down the provenance of what data is going to be provided by a publisher, and then the expectations about the downstream use by any one of those subscribers or recipients of the information. A lot of times that's embodied in a memorandum of understanding, in addition to the documentation in an IAPD package. Tammy's gone through extensive work with some of the health and human services and juvenile services agencies on codifying memoranda of understanding too, that they really consolidate, summarize the expectations of information sharing between partners. But again, it's this whole collaborative process that the NIEM model and the NIEM process fosters that that makes all that possible, to all the way to signing memorandum of understanding that that makes sense and that are enforceable by the justice partners. It's web services transactions. A web service really specifies a contract, right, between two entities in the technical world, and that translates to things like MOUs in the business world, among the executives, among the government agencies that do these things. Another important point here is the importance of the response messaging. So we go to great pains to use NIEM to define the content of the information that's going to be provided. But the IIJ, the Integrated Justice Program, also specifies standards for response messaging in order to the ability to consistently convey success of a given transaction, or to convey errors that were encountered in processing. So there's an asynchronous response that can actually bring error messaging back to a sender, and that's been a critical part of the architecture, which I will get to in a moment. So we go from the anatomy of an individual exchange, and again, NIEM is the core of this, but it's also leveraging things like the global reference architecture service specification package to wrap that NIEM payload in a consistent messaging protocols, message headers, and security implementations. Here I should pause and mention that all of this is XML and SOAP web services. The initial exchanges were NIEM 2.0, 2.1, we're up to using 5.2, and as some of the Q&A has suggested earlier, a whole mix. I mean, IIJ has evolved with the NIEM model in incorporating, trying to use the latest versions. But we haven't felt the need to go back and upgrade or retrofit. It's that principle that Dr. Scott alluded to, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And right now it ain't broke. It's good to know, and it's really exciting that NIEM 6 is providing kind of a clearer and more robust path to upgrade. We expect to start getting, and we do frequently get some pressure from some service providers, developers who kind of scoff at SOAP and XML and say, well, JSON and RESTful services are the way to go. Got a path here to help Iowa make those updates as needed and as required by the community. But again, what's in place right now works. So we'll go from that one exchange to just a simple diagram about the overall implementation of this architecture. Tammy's program maintains an enterprise service bus capable of handling 200,000 messages through it, and thousands of electronic citations at a time at the end of shifts, as officers come in and end shift their squad in-squad computers. So the importance of that architecture is that it allows you to enforce those contracts, those web services, those agreements between agencies. It allows, in the middle, Tammy's program to validate incoming XML against those schema and enforce the NIEM specifications in real time, in runtime. It allows a consistent application of connectivity, security, the use of X509 certificates, of using SOAP. CJIS has one common standard SOAP header that's used in every one of these calls and every one of these data exchanges as well. So it's that combination of standards, but also the commitment by the people to implement the standards that's given Iowa Integrated Justice not only the scalability, but the longevity. I mean, think about it. They've, since 2007, so that's going on 17 years, as Tammy mentioned, that everybody who gets cited for a traffic violation within the state of Iowa, those transactions are supported here, as well as some of the newer exchanges with health and human. And so the technology makes a lot of this possible. And again, NIEM, somebody made the comment a while ago that we'd still be arguing about how to define or how many characters it needs to be in last name if we didn't have a common ontology and a common model like NIEM. But it's the people that make it, that have worked together with the NIEM process and structure, and really created this culture of share first. I mean, the approach in Iowa isn't, I can't share this information. The approach is, how can I share this information? How can I use the IIJ infrastructure to automate another business process, bring another partner into the group? So I've talked enough. I'm going to turn this back over to Tammy to talk about what's really the secret sauce, executive level agreements, as well as the work on the ground among practitioners across the state. So back to you, Tammy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Jim. Pretty quickly on this slide, but that cooperation is critical. We have a 4-member board, that two from the judicial branch, 2 from the executive branch. That really is the crux of getting the cooperation going. We have an advisory committee, very broad, judicial, prosecutors, public defenders, law enforcement, to make sure that we have important groups represented who have a voice, and so that cooperation is critical for us. And then Jim, if you can go to the next and last slide. As Jim mentioned, we are very lucky in Iowa to have this share first culture. It's an event-driven workflow, meaning when an event happens, we've got a trigger put in place. Oftentimes that starts at the court. Everyone wants court information. And so by that event-driven workflow, that really makes sure that we're sharing intentionally sharing the information that an agency intends to share, and that's what the receiving agency wants to receive. I just want to point out this hosted on a neutral turf. That has been critical for us. Again, we're at the Iowa Department of Management. If we were housed at the Department of Public Safety or at the Attorney General's office, there's no way that our state public defender would be willing to participate and be part of this program. So being on that neutral turf for us has been absolutely critical and has fostered that culture of collaboration and trust, and information sharing. So that's really what I had today. Jim, if you had any final thoughts.
Oh, just that brings up some more stories of legislative change or of change in elected officials where that neutral turf, where it wasn't a court thing or it wasn't a public safety thing, really kind of saved the day for a program that could have been kind of a budgetary football, and could have easily gone the way of those political fights. So yeah, that's a big part of the secret sauce. And I think there are a couple of questions, one about statewide governance. Hopefully Tammy answered that. Just really remarkable how sustainable that's been too. The governance model survived 3 or 4 governors now. And then Mike had a question about the anatomy or the response. So a callback. So every one of these exchanges, the architecture requires a synchronous response, so an acknowledgement, or get a 400 error if you can't reach a web service on the other end or to deliver a message. But the asynchronous response is actually another small NIEM data exchange. It's its own web service, its own endpoint, if you will, for each one of the submitters and provider and recipients. And that NIEM XML payload specifies some metadata about what data exchange this was, the timestamp, the message ID to uniquely identify a message, as well as the as space in that XML payload to define results of processing, an error message if there's one available. We use that in some of the court exchanges where a message, where user intervention is required to actually finally accept a message. If the user doesn't, in clerk review and e-filing review, if a clerk wants to reject a message, they can put a message in there that says last name is missing, send it back, and use that asynchronous response to actually communicate with users of the application that sent the message. So it's a lot more than just a callback. It's really a way to complete that loop between sender and recipient, and that handshake of that contract that a web service represents. So hope that answered the question, Mike.
All right. Well, very, very enlightening. And thank you so much for what a great presentation, and also your continued efforts towards NIEMOpen. I got to tell you, it's really impressive how you've stuck throughout the years and really demonstrated the value and growth of how NIEM can continue to support you past, present, and going forward. Hopefully the future when you get those AI demands.
Right.
So with that, we'll move on to another really great on the ground sort of implementation and just kind of highlight some new dimensions that are going on with the development in ontologies. And so at this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Wormelli, who is on our Business Architecture Committee as a coach, or one of the 3 chairs. Actually, we now have tri-chair, and Ms. Jody Levique, who's the Assistant CEO with Sonoma County Courts. Paul, would you like to take this on?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. I first want to thank everybody for joining today, and particularly those of you that have been involved in the hard work of making NIEM a reality over this whole century, basically. We're delighted to be able to share some of these innovative notions with you. Sometimes those of us that labor on the NIEM Business Architecture Committee and the NIEM Technical Architecture Committee feel like we're taking the field of dreams approach, that we'll build it and we hope they'll come. And we do this with some trepidation because we're not always sure that people will really turn this into reality. And much as we like to hear Brad talk about where the future lies and the aspirational notions of where NIEM ought to be, and that's really important. It's also important to say what's going on the ground, and what's real about all this. And I really appreciate Tammy and Jim telling us about what happened at the state level in Iowa, and other states have followed this model too. But there's also a lot happening at the county level and the local level to take advantage of NIEMOpen and throughout this whole system. And we have a special discussion about what's happening in Sonoma County, California, because Sonoma County came to the attention of the NIEM Management Office because they're doing something that we never really anticipated. When we first started NIEM, we were all focused on the message exchange and how do we automate that exchange from point A to point B. And what we really discovered as a result of the work in Sonoma County is there's a whole different way to use NIEM, and that's to take advantage of the NIEM API that we created and are enhancing, as you heard previously, and to apply this in more innovative technology to do things that we never really dreamed of, but we're finding ways to do that, to create, as Brad told you, the kind of ontology that'll link together multiple different disciplines. And so we wanted to tell you a little bit about this example of what Sonoma is doing to really put NIEM into practice. Sonoma is moving rapidly to do this. They're in phase 3 of a 4-phase project to implement the use of NIEM in this innovative way. So what I'd like to do is start us off with a little bit of a description of what Sonoma is doing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jody to talk about what the implications are of this whole approach to building a new notion of interoperability at the county level, which is, you've seen what a state can do. Now we're talking about what can happen at the county level. So if you go to the next slide, what Sonoma started off with a very simple system that was built some 40 years ago that was really a monolithic system where everybody had to use the same computer in the sky. And of course, over time, that developed into a situation where individual agencies had their own case management or records management system and said, we don't want to do that anymore. So how do we connect them? So in looking at how to do this, Sonoma came up with a new idea of having taking advantage of new technology, particularly cloud native technology, and implementing a knowledge graph to create a justice ecosystem, as they call it, to provide an event-driven architecture that links all the events that occur in the process of the administration of justice, using the knowledge graph to maintain that single point of reference for everything that goes on, but then making that knowledge graph defined by NIEMOpen, which is the innovative use of NIEM that we really hadn't anticipated, where NIEMOpen becomes the tool to set up, basically to define the data model that the knowledge graph incorporates. And then the portal that will take advantage of providing that data to any and all users is also defined by the NIEM model. So this really not only constrains but controls the quality of the data and the meaning of the data as it moves from the sheriff's domain to the prosecutor to the courts to corrections. So some of the objectives that Sonoma had in mind were to create basically one single pane of glass, as they call it, so that on one screen or one entry point, you can get a 360-degree view of people and of cases. And a big part of this was having an entity resolved knowledge graph, so that you have a very reliable and dependable and accurate matching of name records as people move through the system. But at any point, and any agency that's involved can have that complete picture of all the involvements that a person has had across the criminal justice system, and any activity related to the case, and any data that's relevant to the case, wherever it came from. It's a recognition that, all the agencies in the justice system have to depend upon data that's collected by other agencies in many cases. And that data has to be brought together in a meaningful way to help make decisions run. So they also were looking at a technology that allowed this entity resolved knowledge graph to support the use of generative AI to take advantage of natural language query capabilities that you couldn't do otherwise, and to really help define insights and not just to count things. And they wanted a system that could run anywhere, whether it's on premise or in a cloud or in any cloud, with appropriate security controls. So that was the structure, that was the intent of this. Next slide, please. So the components of the system in Sonoma includes the ability to integrate the data from the various partners, as in law enforcement, prosecution, courts and corrections, including the public defender, probation, across the whole justice enterprise, with an event orchestration that manages the events as they occur throughout the processes of justice. The entity resolution software, they're using some of the best in the world to resolve names, and the knowledge graph and the portal and access to providing all this data to provide the kind of outputs and availability of data to all the stakeholders that are involved. And that's kind of the nut of the whole thing. So, Jody, do you want to talk a little bit about how the courts see this and what you think it might be of value to you once this is fully implemented?
Absolutely. Thank you. So hi, everybody. My name is Jody Levesque. I'm the Assistant Court Executive Officer for Sonoma County Superior Court. My responsibilities include overseeing all non-judicial court operations. I've been with the California courts for almost 30 years and have actually worked in 4 different counties. Got to Sonoma Court about 2.5 years ago. I was involved in implementing new case management systems in the first 3 courts, and now I'm project managing the conversion to yet another system in this 4th one. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so I'm going to kind of give you a little of the non-technical side and more of what it is from the court's perspective. So while our court and county are integrated more than most California counties, there's definitely issues and concerns with the way it is right now in Sonoma. The county created a custom solution when the court went to a separate case management system back in 2017, where previously we were all on the same legacy system. This custom solution was designed to communicate with the court's new system, but there have been continuous issues and concerns, and quite frankly, has been a nightmare at times. This solution had resulted in errors and issues for the county if the court doesn't enter information in a specific order. So to be honest, the case management system is the court's file, and non-court people should not be dictating the order in which we process our work. However, if we don't, then the integration fails, and we don't want that either. So one of the first modifications I tried to make for the court when I arrived was to change the court's case numbering conventions so it would be consistent with the model most of the California courts were using. The antiquated numbering system we were using just didn't make sense any longer. But after months of discussion and preparation and testing, we still received a request from the prosecutor's office to delay the implementation 1 week before go live because they had just realized they weren't sure how to handle co-defendant case tracking. This custom solution was so specific for the justice partners that they didn't always know what they needed since the information was just always there. We had worked closely with the county's information systems department, who had vetted everything and advised that they were ready to go. So we couldn't delay because it affected all case types, not just criminal, and everybody else was ready and prepared for the change to occur. So we went ahead and moved forward with the change, and it ended up working out just fine. But it did demonstrate to us that the old systems just weren't viable any longer, and that they were affecting the court's ability to improve court processes. So around that same time, the county was looking for a new system to replace their 40-year-old system. And after extensive research with all the justice partners, including the court, on what they needed, a decision was made to have everyone's information sent to one location. And then each justice partner can pull out the information they need as long as they had rights to that data. So this is really exciting from the court's perspective. We agreed with the principle of having all information go to one location, kind of a type of central solution. We'll be able to send the requested data to this hub and then be able to pull out any needed data from the hub. This, I imagine, will be so much more efficient for the respective IT departments to manage. We will no longer need individual exchanges with various agencies, but just one line that benefits everyone. I'm going to stress here that it is imperative that there be a strong relationship between the court and county in order to make something like this work. We are lucky to have such great people to work with that we're all on the same page regarding the anticipated outcome. It is the best business option to have a standard of data to exchange. Therefore, I had meetings with all of the justice partners to discuss this process and what data needed to be exchanged. We decided on the 7 exchanges of information that goes out to the county and the 5 exchanges of information that comes to the court. All of the information goes to and comes from the single hub. So I already had a justice partner ask if they could bypass and connect directly with the courts, and we said absolutely not. This is a sustainable and supportable system. We will no longer have the individual lines of communication going down and having to deal with repercussions of data not being exchanged timely or in the correct order. And I cannot stress to you how big of a deal this is for the court. We will be able to focus on entering our information into our own case management system, and the standardized data will be automatically exchanged correctly and timely. So this is a win for the court and county alike, and we are really excited for it to go live. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Jody. That's a great point of why this is all a good approach. Can you have the next slide real quick, Phil? One of the reasons that the NIEM PMO and the NBAC NTAC got interested in this Sonoma application is because the technology of the knowledge graph, and particularly the entity resolved knowledge graph, and the tools, the cloud native tools that are used, and the microservices and the new approaches of open source cloud native software makes it real easy to connect this system to other domains, which, as you all know, is one of the fundamental original purposes of NIEM, is to have cross-domain information sharing. And with this architecture, it's easy actually to connect to health and human services or transportation or emergency management or other domains which can have their own knowledge graph that are unique to those domains. But with using the knowledge graph technology, it's a lot easier to connect to hundreds of sources if necessary to bring the context of what you're doing together. So this really becomes a very important feature of what Sonoma's doing, and we think we're hopeful that other domains will find this approach useful and figure out more to how we can integrate data across domains like we really intended to do all along. One more slide, Phil. And you know what Sonoma really sees in this is using the idea of an event-driven architecture with the portal to be able to resolve the resolution of entities across all the contributing agencies to make a flexible, freely deployable system, whether it's on your own laptop or on the server at the county level or in the cloud. Can all work together to achieve this. So we're delighted to see this innovative approach, and I will tell you now that what's really exciting to us at the NIEM management office level is the same architecture is being replicated by Ernst & Young in Washington, D.C., where we have a federal and local combination of entities in the justice enterprise there doing the same approach. So this will be a new model for how this kind of collaboration can work between federal and effectively state and local agencies as well. Thank you, Catherine.
All right, thank you so much, and very excited. I'm going to share my screen again, and again, thank you to everyone who has on the panel. You've brought a lot to the table to our community, and we are very excited about the all the innovations and the work that has been going on over the last several years with NIEM. And I hope this really, for the members who have joined this webinar, I hope this has opened your eyes to at least some of the things, the innovations, the changes that NIEM has gone through since it first stood up over 20 years ago. With that, just again, talking a little bit about the future of NIEM and why you should choose NIEMOpen for your interoperability across multiple, whether it's information domains, or just even within your own organization. What we find is a lot of times there are disparate systems and you need to collect all that data and be able to show it in a single unified picture. NIEMOpen is working towards becoming an official or recognized standard with OASIS, as you heard Jim Cabral talk about, expanding the architecture, making it more robust, and innovating for as we see the future come online with AI being more of a possibility. Anybody who follows some futurists out there, there are some predictions that we are going to be far more automated with AI as of 2030 than we've ever seen in the past, just as a basis of Moore's law and how we have reached some critical milestones in technology and innovation. So I do hope you'll be on that journey with us and be able to enjoy the opportunities that NIEM provides. As you're going forward and you're making considerations for adopting and using NIEM, I just want to share with you there is a direct return on investment for using a standard such as NIEM. We have some tooling to help you with those calculations, but we can also share those stories directly. Also, having NIEM as an open standard, an official open standard, can be used in your contracting language, in your policy and doctrine, that sort of thing, and be formally recognized. So there's a lot of value here if you're not already on board, and we can help you to really tell that story directly to your development team all the way up to your senior leaderships. So with that, I would just advocate, the time to get on board couldn't be more advantageous right now. Become a sponsor of NIEM, become part of the community, participate. We have 3 committees that are available that you can provide in-kind resources directly and shape the future. for innovation. So you could be part of the business architecture committee. You can be part of the technical architecture committee or in the NIEM management office. All of these are welcome contributions to the overall open source community. And so with that, I'm going to share with you, we do have a plethora of resources available. If you're just quite the introvert and don't want to participate and do your development behind closed doors, NIEMOpen is open source. It is available to you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up for more Q&A. We've had a pretty robust session of Q&A all along, and I am grateful to everyone who's been posting questions and our panel members who've been answering. But with that, I'll read the next few questions, and in some cases I'll answer or open it up to the panel. So Mr. Donald Bergeron, hopefully I've said your last name properly. Connections to external practitioners yet? Donald, I'm not sure I fully understand your question. What I would tell you is, at least from an initial answer, is that because NIEMOpen is available, it is already being leveraged by multiple vendors out there, put in their tool sets. Are they directly connecting with the NIEM management office? No. It is one of the downsides to being an open source standard. We don't have a licensing model where we can track your usage. So unless you tell us, we don't know, or unless we find an article online, we don't know. But that said, there is a plethora out there. Additionally, there's probably about 10 or more standards, other standards that are using NIEM, as Jim Cabral mentioned, as part of their standard, the APCO standard, and there's biometrics and like I said, a multitude of other standards. Hopefully I've answered your question, but if not, we can maybe open the mic.
I can answer that from a slightly different viewpoint, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that would be
Because I
great.
think it ties really nicely into not just the ROI, beyond ROI, the strategic advantage of using NIEM, but more to the point, ties directly into what Jody was talking about with the Sonoma County experience. She mentioned the transition from a legacy integrated system to a new court case management system. That's one of the key advantages of using a NIEM-based framework for information exchanges to facilitate the adoption of new systems, whether they're internal or external, right? Having that common sort of standards makes it easier for you to fold in a new system with a new data structure and align it to that same common set of vocabulary terms that you had previously. And Jim and Tammy touched on this as well. But more tactically, even the anecdote about reclassifying how co-defendant cases are attributed, for example, having two-person records tied to one case record, and then at some point in the future changing to two-person records, each with their own case record, is a fundamental data structure change that changes the way messages go back and forth between systems, which is also much easier to accommodate with NIEM systems and execute faster, quite frankly, as well.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any other panelists who'd like to maybe add to the answer? Okay, well, hopefully we've addressed your question. I'll move on. The next is a comment actually from Mr. Steve Sorensen. Sonoma County has received approval from the California DOJ to deploy in the cloud with AI. That's exciting news. And so we are excited to be part of that journey with you. Brian Boyd also posted a question. Are you familiar with NANDA project out of MIT? It is an effort to create superstructure to facilitate the coming web of AI agentic systems. Data sharing and governance are an integral part of this effort. Brian, personally, I'm not. I don't know if any of the other panel members are. Thank you for sharing that information. We will definitely do some research. And if you're open to it, I'll do a direct outreach to you to further learn about this project and maybe see if we can talk about partnering. And Mr. Doug Oates provided a comment. Thank you for the very kind comment, Doug. This was truly exceptional, professional, helpful. Gratitude to the panelists. Thank you. Brian Boyd said definitely. I think that means definitely we answered the question. And with that, do we have
Catherine,
any?
I think there
We
was a
did have
question
some
from Don
comments.
Bergeron at some point, right?
I'm sorry?
That's right.
Don asked about NIEM extending to external entities. I think he's specifically talking about attorneys, et cetera. I want to address that. First of all, good to see you, Don. Don, for those who don't recognize that name, he was involved with the Legal XML program here at OASIS very early on. And he should be very familiar with the electronic court filing standard that he was participating on. That is now widely adopted across US courts. And that is the standard by which most electronic or much electronic filing happens today, and which the attorney systems that are filing into courts have to comply. That, of course, is based on NIEM. So there's a good example of where attorneys are using NIEM today when they're interacting with the courts. The other thing that's coming, I think, and I alluded to this earlier to Doug's question. He asked about digital evidence management. Increasingly, we're seeing some of the information that looks like a document come into court through the e-filing system, but things that don't look like documents now need to be submitted through a separate system called digital evidence management system. And while we have good standards today, interoperable standards supported by lots of solution providers in the e-filing space, we don't have those today in the digital evidence management space. That is something that IJIS and others are interested in jumping in and help to fix that. And IJIS is launching a work group to work on that soon. And technical standards are within the bailiwick of that work group. And presumably those standards will be based on NIEM. So I think there's more coming in that area very soon, Don, that you can look for.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jim. All right, we are at 1 minute till end. Again, I want to send my greatest gratitude to all our panelists, members, and all of those who have participated. You are welcome to directly reach out to me with questions, and we will be posting both this video after we get it cleaned up and the slides so that you have them. If you would like for the NIEM Management Office to do additional briefings with your particular organization, please, again, feel free to reach out. And again, I would urge you that if you're not already part of the official NIEMOpen project, either as a sponsor or directly contributing to any of the technical communities, please consider doing so, because your contributions are going to make the difference between NIEM, standing still or continuing to thrive and move forward with the way technology is moving. So with that, I hand it back to you, our IJIS leadership, who again, thank you for hosting this webinar, and I'll close off.
Thank you, Catherine. Forgive me for the blurry background, but I've had to make some changes and there's a problem with my camera. But either way, thank you so much. I believe it was very informative. I think that there was great value in the information that was provided. I do urge the participants to follow up with the videotape and any questions, whether it's to the PMO, whether it's to IJIS, anyone in the community, that ultimately we seek to support your operational needs, regardless of what side of the table you're on. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.